The boss fell, wounded, bleeding on the marble. Everyone screamed except for her. Nobody knew that the young employee had already saved lives before and was about to do it again. But what happened in that operating room didn't just change one person's destiny. It unearthed a truth that no one, not even him, was prepared to face. Chapter 1. The August heat in Atlanta fell like molten lead on the cobblestone streets of the Buckhead neighborhood. In the colonial revival mansion of the Davis family, located in the exclusive Druid Hills area, the afternoon silence was shattered by the sound of glass crashing against the marble floor. Hope Miller, 24, dropped the damp cloth she held in her delicate hands and ran toward the main study. Her green eyes, the color of fresh mint leaves, filled with horror at the scene unfolding before her. There lay Sebastian Davis, 32, heir to a hotel chain that stretched from Miami to Charleston, sprawled on the Carrara marble floor. His white linen shirt, which had cost more than Hope's monthly salary, was soaked in blood. A deep cut in his abdomen stained everything around him. Hope didn't hesitate for a second. Her legs, tanned by the Georgia sun and firm from years of walking long distances, carried her to him in an instant. She knelt beside the man who, until that moment, had barely looked at her more than 3 times in the 8 months she had worked for his family. Her hands, small but sure, pressed the wound with the apron she was wearing. "Mr. Davis, sir, please, don't leave me," she cried, her voice breaking, while with her other hand she frantically dialed 911 on the cell phone lying on the mahogany desk. But Hope wasn't just another domestic employee. Her history held secrets that no one in that house knew. She had been a specialized emergency room nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital, one of the most prestigious in all of Georgia. For 5 years, she had saved lives, fighting death side by side with the best doctors in the country. Her reputation was impeccable, her dedication unwavering. She had met the love of her life in those white hallways, Dr. Richard Sanders, a cardiovascular surgeon she planned to marry and start a family with. Everything had changed one night last November. Richard was leaving the hospital after a 12-hour surgery when a drunk driver crashed into his car on I-285. He died instantly, but Hope's pain hadn't ended there. 3 days after the funeral, she discovered she was pregnant. The baby they had longed for had finally arrived, but Richard was no longer there to welcome it. 4 months into her pregnancy, one morning while organizing Richard's belongings, Hope began to bleed. She rushed to the hospital where she had worked, where everyone knew her, but it was too late. She lost the baby that same afternoon, in the same room where she had helped hundreds of children be born. The loss broke her completely. She couldn't return to the hospital. She couldn't see a white coat without reliving the pain. She couldn't hear the sound of the monitors without remembering the heartbeats that had been silenced forever. She quit. She sold everything she owned. She moved away from her family, her friends, from everything that reminded her of who she had been. She became a shadow of herself. It was her cousin Marissa who got her the job with the Davis family. "You just need to clean and cook, cuz. Don't think about anything else. Just let time heal the wounds," she had told her. Hope accepted because she had no other options. She moved into a small servants' quarter in the back of the mansion and dedicated herself to being invisible. Now, with her hands stained with Sebastian's blood, something was awakening inside her. The medical knowledge she had tried to bury began to spring forth like water from a well. She knew exactly what to do. "I need clean towels and alcohol," she murmured to herself while keeping pressure on the wound. With precise movements, she managed to control the bleeding until the paramedics arrived. In the ambulance, on the way to Emory University Hospital, Hope got in without anyone asking her. She took Sebastian's hand, which was unconscious, and for the first time in months she felt her heart beat with purpose. "Don't go, sir," she whispered, looking at his face. It was the first time she had seen him up close. His features were sharp, masculine, with a square jaw that spoke of a strong character. His dark brown hair had some premature grey hairs at the temples. Even unconscious, he radiated the power and confidence of someone accustomed to the world moving at his pace. Upon arriving at the hospital, everything became a nightmare. The on-duty nurse, a blonde woman in her 40s with a severe expression and haughty demeanor, looked her up and down with contempt. "Who are you?" she asked with a sharp voice. I'm an employee of the family. I found him," Hope replied, feeling the blood rush to her cheeks. "Then go sit in the waiting room." "There's no place for a maid here," the nurse snapped, pointing toward the blue plastic chairs at the end of the hallway. Hope felt as if a dagger had been plunged into her stomach. It wasn't just the public humiliation, it was hearing that inner voice that had been whispering to her for months. "You're nobody anymore, you're worthless. You have nothing to contribute to the world." She walked to the waiting room on shaky legs and sat in silence. Around her were relatives of other patients, some crying, others in silence. The smell of disinfectant made her dizzy. The sounds of the monitors transported her to her worst nightmares. She wanted to run, but she knew she couldn't leave without knowing if Sebastian would be okay. 2 hours later, a young doctor came out of the operating room with a worried expression. His shouts were heard throughout the hallway. "I need help! The patient is in hypovolemic shock! The pressure is dropping!" The blonde nurse ran toward him, but it was clear she didn't know what to do. 2 other doctors approached, but there was confusion, shouting, desperate movements. Hope slowly stood up. Her hands began to tremble. Her heart raced. "Where is the head nurse?" one of the doctors shouted. "She's at a conference in New York City," someone else replied. The monitor began to emit that long, monotonous sound that Hope knew very well. Sebastian was dying. Without another thought, Hope sped across the hallway. She pushed open the operating room door and entered. The entire medical team looked at her in surprise. "Get her out of here!" the blonde nurse yelled, but Hope was already next to the operating table. Her green eyes quickly assessed the situation. She knew exactly what was happening and what needed to be done. "He needs immediate volume replacement. Wide open saline, 2 peripheral lines. The bleeding is internal. We need to go in now," she said in a firm, clear voice. The lead doctor looked at her strangely. "Who the heck are you?" "Someone who knows what she's doing," Hope replied, as her hands moved with the precision of years of experience. "Let me help." For the next 7 minutes, Hope directed the operation as if she had been born for it. Her hands didn't tremble once. Her instructions were precise, clear, effective. She helped locate the exact point of the internal bleeding and guided the surgeon to control it. When the monitor finally began to show stable vital signs, the entire operating room fell silent. Hope took off her bloody gloves and left without saying a word. The next day, Sebastian woke up. The first thing he saw when he opened his blue eyes, the color of the clear morning sky of Lake Lanier, was Hope's face. She was sitting in a chair next to his bed, in the same clothes from the day before, her eyes swollen with fatigue. "How?" He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. "Don't talk much," she said softly, handing him a glass of water with a straw. "You were very sick." Sebastian looked at her carefully for the first time. He noticed the delicacy of her features, the softness of her fair skin, lightly tanned by the southern sun. Her light brown hair had golden highlights that shone in the light coming through the window. She was beautiful, but not an ostentatious beauty. It was the kind of beauty that you discover little by little, that grows in the heart before the eyes. "Did you save me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Hope looked away. "The doctors saved you, sir." "Don't lie to me," he insisted, trying to sit up a little. "I know what happened. The doctors told me." A woman came into the operating room and directed the operation. "That was you, wasn't it?" Hope felt tears welling up. She nodded slowly. "Who are you, really?" Sebastian asked, with an intensity in his gaze that she hadn't expected. "Nobody important, sir," she replied, standing up. "I should go back to the house. Your family will be worried." But Sebastian reached out and took her hand before she could move away. His touch was soft but firm. "You're not nobody if you saved my life," he said. "And stop calling me sir. My name is Sebastian." For the first time in months, Hope smiled. It was a small, shy smile, but it was real. "My name is Hope," she whispered. "Hope," he repeated, as if savoring each syllable. "It fits you perfectly." At that moment, neither of them knew that this simple exchange of names would be the beginning of something that would change their lives forever. But there were secrets, pain, and obstacles that had yet to come to light, and Sebastian's family would not be willing to easily accept that a domestic employee had entered their heir's heart. The door to the room burst open, and in walked Valerie Davis, Sebastian's 29-year-old younger sister, a corporate law attorney with a tongue as sharp as her ambition. Her platinum blonde hair was perfectly styled back, and her black pantsuit probably cost more than Hope's entire wardrobe. "What is she doing here?" she asked in a cold tone, looking at Hope as if she were an insect. "Valerie, please," Sebastian began. "No, Sebastian. This person should not be in your hospital room. It's completely inappropriate," Valerie continued, crossing her arms. Hope quickly let go of Sebastian's hand and took a step back. I was just leaving," she murmured. "Hope, no," Sebastian said, trying to sit up. "You have every right to be here." "Right," Valerie scoffed. "She's the maid, Sebastian, not family." "She saved my life," he replied firmly. "That's what the rumors say, but I have my doubts," Valerie responded, looking at Hope with suspicion. "How could a maid know about medicine? Don't you find that suspicious?" Hope felt the world collapsing around her again. Valerie's accusatory gaze, the tense hospital atmosphere, everything reminded her why she had decided to hide from the world. "Excuse me," she whispered, and quickly left the room. Sebastian tried to call her back, but it was too late. As she walked down the hospital hallway with hurried steps, Hope wondered if it had been a mistake to come out of the shadows, even for a few minutes, but something had changed inside her. For the first time in months she had felt that her life had purpose. For the first time in months she had felt a real connection with someone, and for the first time in months she had remembered who she used to be before pain turned her into a shadow. Could it be possible that two broken hearts could find the healing they had both been searching for in each other? Or would the weight of their secrets and social differences be too much to overcome? Chapter 2. A week after the incident at the hospital, the Davis mansion had returned to its usual routine, but something had changed irreversibly. Sebastian had returned home with strict orders to rest, but his behavior was completely different. For the first time in the 8 months Hope had worked there, he would seek her out with his gaze, ask her how she had slept, and even manage to be in the kitchen when she was preparing breakfast. It was a September morning, when the cool air of the Atlanta metro area began to hint at autumn. Hope was in the backyard watering the hydrangeas that surrounded the limestone fountain when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Sebastian watching her from the glass door of the dining room. "Good morning, Hope," he said, approaching slowly. He was wearing a white cotton shirt open at the neck and beige linen pants. Despite the wound that was still healing, he looked strong, imposing, but there was something different in his blue eyes, a softness that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Mr. Davis," she replied, lowering her gaze to the purple flowers she held in her hands. "You shouldn't be on your feet for so long. The doctor said you need to rest." "Doctors say a lot of things," he replied with a smile that she couldn't see because she was still looking down. "But there's something more important than rest." "What's that?" Hope asked, finally looking up. "Getting to know the real you," Sebastian said, and the words hung in the air like the scent of the jasmine growing near the wall. Hope felt her heart race. "Sir, I'm nobody interesting. I'm just what?" he interrupted, taking another step closer. "A woman who saved my life, someone who knows more about medicine than doctors with years of experience, a person who hides behind brooms and rags when it's obvious you have so much more to offer the world." Hope's cheeks turned the color of the roses in Mrs. Evelyn Davis's garden. "You shouldn't talk to me this way," she whispered. "Why not?" he insisted. "Because I work for your family? Because I'm just the maid?" "Because you're much more than that, and we both know it," Sebastian replied with intensity. "The question is, why are you pretending to be less than you are?" Just then, Mrs. Evelyn's piercing voice echoed from the terrace. "Sebastian, what are you doing standing out there? The doctor said absolute rest." Hope took advantage of the interruption to quickly walk away toward the rose bushes at the back of the garden. Sebastian sighed and walked toward his mother, an elegant 58-year-old woman, with her hair perfectly styled in a low bun and always dressed as if she were going to a gala dinner, even if she was just having breakfast at home. "Mom, I'm fine," he said, kissing her on the cheek. "Are you fine?" Mrs. Evelyn replied, looking at him with those grey eyes that didn't miss a thing. "You look very different since you came back from the hospital." "Different how?" "I don't know. More present. As if you've woken up from a very long dream," his mother observed, studying his face. "And I've noticed you spend a lot of time watching the new employee." Sebastian felt himself tense involuntarily. "She's a good worker." "Sebastian, I know that look," Mrs. Evelyn said in a warning tone. "It's the same look your father had when he met me. And I'll remind you that your father and I were from the same social class." "Mom, no. Listen carefully," she continued, taking him by the arm. "That girl is very pretty, I'll admit it, and apparently she has some basic medical knowledge that came in handy. But don't get confused. She works for us. We don't mix with the staff. We never have." "What if she wasn't a domestic employee?" Sebastian asked, surprising himself with the question. Mrs. Evelyn stared at him. "But she is, and you are the heir to a hotel empire. You have responsibilities, Sebastian, to the company, to the family, to yourself." That afternoon, as Hope was cleaning the marble floors in the main living room, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Dr. Ray Thompson, 45, medical director of Emory University Hospital and a longtime friend of the Davis family. He was carrying a thick folder full of papers. "Where is the employee who entered the operating room last week?" he asked bluntly, after greeting Mrs. Evelyn and Sebastian. "Why do you need her?" Mrs. Evelyn asked with suspicion. "I need to ask her some questions, Doctor," Thompson replied. What she did in the operating room was extraordinary, but also very irregular. A domestic employee can't just enter a surgery and direct an operation. There are protocols. There are laws. Hope appeared at the entrance of the room, with the vacuum cleaner in her hand. Upon seeing Dr. Thompson, she visibly paled. "You must be Hope Miller," he said, consulting the folder. We need to talk. Talk about what? Sebastian intervened, standing up. About how a domestic employee knows advanced surgical techniques, the doctor replied without taking his eyes off Hope. I've been doing some research, Ms. Miller, and I've found some very interesting things. The silence became as thick as the humidity of a typical southern summer. Hope felt her legs begin to give way. What kind of things? Mrs. Evelyn asked, her voice filled with suspicion. Dr. Thompson opened the folder and took out several documents. To Hope Miller, 24, born in a small town in Georgia, a specialized emergency room nurse, graduated with honors from the University of Georgia, worked 5 years at Grady Memorial Hospital. Impeccable record, multiple awards for her work during mass emergencies. He paused dramatically, until she abruptly resigned last November without giving an explanation. All the air seemed to leave Hope's lungs. Mrs. Evelyn was looking at her as if she had just seen a ghost. Sebastian had an expression of complete astonishment on his face. Is that true? Mrs. Evelyn asked in an icy voice. Hope nodded slowly, without looking up from the floor. Why did you quit? Sebastian asked softly. Why did you become a domestic employee if you were a nurse? Tears began to roll down Hope's cheeks. All the pain, all the loss, all the shame she had been holding for months threatened to come out at once. Because, she began in a broken voice, because I couldn't be that person anymore. What happened? Sebastian insisted, moving closer to her. Sebastian, it's none of our business, Mrs. Evelyn intervened firmly. Yes, it is, he replied, without taking his eyes off Hope. She saved my life. I have a right to know who she really is. Hope took a deep breath and finally looked up. Her green eyes were cloudy with tears, but there was determination in them. My fiancé was a doctor at Grady Memorial, she began in a trembling voice. Dr. Richard Sanders. We were going to get married in December. We were expecting a baby. Sebastian felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. One night, Richie was leaving the hospital late after a very complicated surgery. A drunk driver. Her voice broke. He died on impact. The silence in the room was deafening. 3 days after the funeral, when I was organizing his things, I started bleeding. I lost the baby 4 months into the pregnancy, in the same hospital where I had worked for years, in the same room where I had helped hundreds of children be born. Mrs. Evelyn put a hand to her chest, visibly moved despite her prejudices. I couldn't go back, Hope continued. Every time I saw a white coat, every time I heard the sound of the monitors, I relived everything. The day Richie died, the day I lost our baby, all the nights I stayed awake wondering why me, why them. Hope, Sebastian whispered, taking a step toward her. I sold everything I had. I moved away from my family because I couldn't bear their pity. I moved away from my friends because I couldn't pretend to be okay. I came to Atlanta because I needed to disappear, because I no longer knew who I was without Richie, without our baby, without my profession. Why didn't you tell us? Sebastian asked. Because when you've lost everything you loved, you learn to live by being invisible, she replied. Because it's easier to be nobody than to be someone who used to have everything. Dr. Thompson slowly closed the folder. Ms. Miller, I've reviewed your file. You were an exceptional nurse. Your superiors described you as one of the best they had ever had. Was, Hope repeated bitterly. Keyword, was. Skills aren't forgotten, the doctor said. What you did in the operating room last week proved that. Sebastian would be dead if it hadn't been for you. But I'm not a nurse anymore, Hope insisted. I'm a domestic employee, and that's okay. Is it okay? Sebastian asked with intensity. Is it okay to waste a talent that can save lives? Is it okay to condemn yourself to be invisible when you could be extraordinary? You don't understand, Hope burst out, surprising everyone. You don't understand what it feels like to fail at the one thing you were good at. I was a nurse, but I couldn't save my fiancé. I was a woman, but I couldn't protect my baby. I was all that, and now I'm nothing. The silence that followed was broken only by Hope's sobs. Sebastian approached slowly, and without caring about the presence of his mother and the doctor, hugged her. It was a soft but firm hug that completely enveloped her. You are the bravest woman I know, he whispered in her ear. You are the woman who kept going after losing everything. You are the woman who saved a stranger's life without asking for anything in return. You are everything, but nothing. For the first time since Richard's death, Hope allowed herself to cry in someone's arms. She clung to Sebastian's shirt as if it were a life preserver in the middle of a shipwreck. Mrs. Evelyn watched the scene with mixed emotions. On one hand, her heart was moved by the girl's genuine pain. On the other, her practical mind reminded her of all the reasons why this situation was complicated. Dr. Thompson, she said finally, what exactly do you need from Hope? I need her to consider returning to the hospital, he replied. We have a vacancy for night shift nursing supervisor. It's a position with a lot of responsibility, but after what I saw last week, I believe she's more than qualified. Hope slowly separated from Sebastian, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I can't, she whispered. Why not? Sebastian asked. Because I'm scared, she admitted. Scared of not being the same person I was before. Scared of failing someone else. Scared of... Of what? He encouraged her softly. Of feeling again, she confessed. Of believing again that I have something valuable to offer the world. Sebastian took her hands in his. They were soft hands, but with working calluses. Hands that had saved lives and also washed floors. I believe in you, he said. And I believe Richie would believe in you too. I believe your baby, wherever they are, would be proud to know that their mum kept saving lives. Hope felt as if a ray of light had pierced the darkness she had lived in for months. What if I fail? She whispered. What if you don't? He replied. Dr. Thompson cleared his throat. Ms. Miller, you don't need to decide right now, but I'm giving you my card. If you change your mind, call me. The world needs nurses like you. After the doctor left, Mrs. Evelyn turned to her son with a serious expression. Sebastian, we need to talk. Alone. Hope understood the hint and headed toward the kitchen, but Sebastian stopped her. Whatever you have to say to me, Mom, you can say it in front of Hope. Are you sure? Mrs. Evelyn asked in a warning tone. Completely. Mrs. Evelyn took a deep breath. Very well. Hope, I now understand why you work here and I understand your pain, but that doesn't change the facts. My son is the heir to an empire that his grandfather built and that his father and I have maintained for decades. He cannot get romantically involved with an employee. It's not personal, it's practical. Mom, Sebastian began. No, let me finish, she continued. If Hope returns to work as a nurse, she will be financially independent. That would be wonderful for her. But you, Sebastian, have commitments. There are expectations. The Coleman family has been waiting for years for you to propose to their daughter, Isabella. It's a union that would benefit both families enormously. Hope felt as if cold water had been thrown on her. Isabella Coleman, the heiress to the most successful restaurant chain in the Southeast. She had seen her in society magazines. Always elegant, always perfect, always on Sebastian's arm at important events. I'm not going to marry Isabella, Sebastian declared firmly. Why not? Mrs. Evelyn asked. Because I don't love her, he replied, without taking his eyes off Hope. And who do you love? His mother asked, though she already knew the answer. Sebastian was silent for a moment that seemed eternal. Then, looking directly into Hope's green eyes, he said, I love a brave woman who hides her light so she won't get hurt anymore. I love a woman who saved my life without really knowing me. I love a woman who has survived losses that would have destroyed weaker people. Hope felt as if her heart was going to burst out of her chest. Had she heard correctly? Had Sebastian Davis, the most eligible bachelor in Atlanta, just confessed his love for her in front of his mother? Sebastian, she whispered, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, he replied, moving closer. I know it's complicated. I know there are obstacles. I know my family will have objections. But I also know that since I opened my eyes in that hospital and saw you there, I felt that I had finally found something real. Mrs. Evelyn stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Sebastian, you are confusing gratitude with love. And you, Hope, if you have any dignity, you won't listen to the fantasies of a man who has just come out of surgery. Mom! Sebastian exclaimed, indignant. It's the truth, Mrs. Evelyn insisted. Hope, you're a good girl. You've suffered a lot and I feel for you. But if you really care for my son, don't ruin him. He has a destiny. He has responsibilities that go beyond his feelings. Hope looked at Sebastian and saw in his blue eyes a mix of love, determination, and also doubt, because as much as she wanted to deny it, his mother was right about some things. They were from different worlds. He had responsibilities that she didn't fully understand. Maybe your mum is right, she said finally, in a voice that was barely audible. What? Sebastian asked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Maybe you're confusing gratitude with love, Hope repeated, feeling as if each word was cutting her throat. Maybe it's better for me to accept Dr. Thompson's offer and go back to the hospital. Maybe it's time for me to rebuild my life away from here. Hope, no, Sebastian said, trying to move closer to her, but she had already turned around and was walking toward the exit. At the door, she stopped without turning back. Thank you for reminding me who I used to be, she said. But I think it's time for each of us to go back to our place. And with those words, Hope left the room, leaving Sebastian with a heart that had just found love and was already losing it. That night, in her small servants' quarter, Hope packed her few belongings. She had made a decision. The next day, she would call Dr. Thompson and accept the job. It was time to stop hiding, but it was also time to face reality. She and Sebastian belonged to worlds that were too different. But what she didn't know was that Sebastian was on the other side of the door, listening to her silent sobs, promising himself that he wouldn't let her go without a fight. Would love be enough to overcome the social and family barriers? Or would the differences between their worlds end up separating them forever? Chapter 3. The Monday morning dawned grey over Atlanta, with those low clouds that promise rain but never bring it. Hope had spent the night awake, sitting next to the small window of her room, watching the garden where just 2 days ago she had had the most important conversation of her life with Sebastian. At 6 in the morning, as she had done for 8 months, she got up, put on the navy blue uniform she wore for work, and headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the family. But this time it was different. This time every movement was a silent farewell. As she was warming up the grits and preparing the fresh biscuits that Mr. Davis loved so much, she heard footsteps in the dining room. It was early, too early for any family member to be awake. She peeked out and saw Sebastian sitting at the dining room table, still in his pajamas, with rumpled hair and deep circles under his eyes that indicated he hadn't slept either. "Good morning," she said softly, not knowing whether she should maintain the formal distance or if, after everything they had shared, she could allow herself some closeness. "Good morning," he replied with a bitter smile. "There's been nothing good about this morning, Hope." She felt a lump in her throat, but she maintained her composure. "I'll get your breakfast ready in a moment." "I'm not hungry," Sebastian said, standing up and walking toward the kitchen. "What I have are questions." "Mr. Davis, Stop calling me sir," he interrupted her gently but firmly. "After everything we've talked about, after what I confessed yesterday, I think we have the right to call each other by our names." Hope continued stirring the grits, using the activity as an excuse not to look directly at him. "It's better if we keep the proper distance." "Appropriate for whom?" he asked, moving closer until he was right behind her. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body. "For my mother? For Atlanta society? Or for you?" Hope closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather her strength. "For everyone." "Lie," Sebastian said softly. "It's to protect yourself." She turned around abruptly, almost bumping into him because of the closeness. Her green eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. "And what if it is?" she snapped. "What if I'm trying to protect myself? Haven't I suffered enough already? Haven't I lost enough? And what if this time you don't lose?" he replied, gently taking her face in his hands. "What if this time you win something beautiful?" "I can't risk it," she whispered. "I can't fall in love with you, Sebastian. I can't let my heart get excited about something we know can't be." "Why can't it be?" he insisted. "Because we're from different worlds," she finally exploded. "Because your family will never accept me. Because you have responsibilities that go beyond what you feel for me. Because Isabella Coleman is perfect for you and I'm just a broken woman who has lost everything she loved." The words hung in the air like the smell of coffee that had burned on the stove. Sebastian looked at her with an intensity that pierced her soul. "Are you finished?" he asked calmly. Hope nodded, unable to speak further. "Good," he continued without letting go of her face. "Now listen to me. I don't care what world you think I come from. I don't care what my family thinks. I don't care about Isabella Coleman, who, by the way, is anything but perfect for me because she isn't you. And I especially don't care that you consider yourself broken, because broken people are the ones who best understand the value of being repaired." "Sebastian, I'm not finished," he interrupted. "You're right about one thing. I have responsibilities, but the most important responsibility I have is to myself, and that is to be happy. It's to find the person who completes me, who challenges me, who makes me want to be a better man. That person is you." Hope felt as if the ground was shaking beneath her feet. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" he asked. "Why can't love be simple?" "Because it never is," she replied sadly. "I loved Richie with all my heart, and life took him from me. I loved my baby before he was born, and they were taken from me too. Love hurts, Sebastian, and I don't know if I have the strength to survive that kind of pain again." Sebastian hugged her then, with so much tenderness that Hope felt as if all her internal walls were starting to crumble. "I'm not going to lie to you," he whispered in her ear. "I can't promise you that we'll never get hurt. I can't promise you it will be easy. But I can promise you that I'm going to fight for us every single day. I can promise you that I will never abandon you like life abandoned Richie. And I can promise you that if you give me a chance, I'm going to love you with the same intensity that you loved them." Just then, Mrs. Evelyn's footsteps echoed in the hallway. They separated immediately, but not quickly enough. Mrs. Evelyn walked into the kitchen and found them standing too close, with emotions too visible on their faces. "Good morning," she said in an icy tone. "Hope, there's something I need to tell you." "Good morning, Mrs. Davis," Hope replied, trying to regain her composure. "What do you need?" "I need you to know that last night I called your cousin Marissa," Mrs. Evelyn said, carefully studying Hope's reaction. "I told her about your employment situation and about your past as a nurse." Hope paled. Marissa was the only person in her family who knew where she was. The others thought she was working at a private clinic in Charleston. "Why did you do that?" Hope asked in a trembling voice. "Because I wanted to better understand who you really are," Mrs. Evelyn replied, "and because I wanted to confirm your story." "And?" Sebastian asked, his voice tense. "Your cousin told me everything," Mrs. Evelyn continued, looking directly at Hope. "She told me about Richie, about the baby you lost, about how you fell apart afterward. But she also told me something you didn't tell us." The silence became heavy like the air before a storm. "What?" Hope whispered. "That Richie wasn't just a doctor," Mrs. Evelyn said slowly. "He was the son of Dr. Leonard Sanders, director of Grady Memorial Hospital. He was from a well-to-do family, from a good social standing. It wasn't a romance between different classes. You two were appropriate for each other." Hope felt as if she had been slapped. That doesn't matter." "It doesn't matter," Mrs. Evelyn replied. "It doesn't matter that you had a comfortable life before, that you knew what it was like to move in high social circles, that you're not really of humble origin as you pretended." "I never pretended anything," Hope exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "I never lied to you about my background." "You didn't lie, but you didn't tell the whole truth either," Mrs. Evelyn insisted. "Why?" Hope took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Because after losing everything, after selling everything, after moving away from everything that had been my life, it no longer mattered where I came from. All that mattered was that I had nothing, that I had lost my place in the world." "But that's not true," Sebastian intervened. "Your place in the world—" "My place in the world was next to Richie," Hope shouted, surprising both of them with the intensity of her voice. "My place in the world was being a mother to my baby. My place in the world was saving lives at that hospital. When I lost all that, I lost my place." Tears finally began to roll down her cheeks. "And that's why I came here," she continued in a broken voice. "That's why I accepted being a domestic employee, not because it was the only thing I knew how to do, but because it was the only thing I could do without remembering who I had been." Mrs. Evelyn watched her in silence for a moment. There was something in her expression that had changed, a softness that hadn't been there before. "Do you know what else your cousin told me?" she finally asked. Hope shook her head. "That Richie and you had talked about having a big family, that you wanted 4 children, that you had chosen names for boys and girls, that he had bought a house in Alpharetta for when you got married, with a big yard for the kids to play in." Every word was like a dagger in Hope's heart. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand something," Mrs. Evelyn said, moving closer to her. "I understand your pain. I understand why you hid. But I also want you to understand that Richie is gone. Your baby is gone. But you are here, and you deserve to be happy again." Hope looked at her in surprise. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Mrs. Evelyn continued, "that if my son really loves you, and if you really love him, then maybe we can find a way to make this work." Sebastian couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Mom?" "But," Mrs. Evelyn added firmly, "it has to be the right way. Hope, if you're going to be with my son, it can't be as a domestic employee. You have to go back to being who you really are. You have to accept that job at the hospital. You have to rebuild your professional life." "I don't know if I can," Hope whispered. "Then you'll have to decide what's stronger," Mrs. Evelyn said. "Your fear or your love?" Just then the house phone rang. Sebastian answered, and after a brief conversation he hung up with a worried expression. "That was Dr. Thompson," he said. "There's an emergency at the hospital, a multiple-car pileup on the highway to Lake Lanier. They're overrun with patients and they need all the help they can get. He asked me if I could contact you, Hope." Hope felt as if fate was testing her. I don't know. "It's now or never," Sebastian said softly. "It's your chance to decide who you want to be." Hope looked alternately at Sebastian and Mrs. Evelyn. In his blue eyes she saw love, hope, and trust. In her grey eyes she saw conditional acceptance, but acceptance nonetheless. "If I go," she said finally, "and if I fail, if I can't do it, then you'll come back here, and we'll find another solution," Sebastian said, taking her hands. "But if you don't try, you'll never know what you're capable of." Hope closed her eyes, and for a moment allowed herself to listen to her heart instead of her fears. She could see Richie smiling at her, encouraging her to move forward. She could feel her unborn baby giving her strength from wherever they were. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." Sebastian kissed her softly on the forehead. "I'll drive you." "No," she said firmly. "This is something I have to do alone." An hour later, Hope was standing in front of the automatic doors of Emory University Hospital, wearing a borrowed nurse's uniform, her heart beating so loudly she was sure it could be heard from the parking lot. She took a deep breath, thought of Richie, thought of her baby, thought of Sebastian waiting for her at home, and walked through the doors. What she didn't know was that the next 12 hours were going to change not only her professional future, but also her relationship with Sebastian in ways neither of them could imagine. Chapter 4. 12 hours later, as the sun began to set over the hills surrounding Atlanta, Hope walked out of Emory University Hospital with slow but sure steps. Her legs were trembling with fatigue, her uniform was stained with sweat and some drops of blood, but in her green eyes there was something that hadn't been there in months: life. The emergency had been as intense as it was devastating. The accident on the highway to Lake Lanier had involved 3 cars and a bus of tourists, 43 injured, 5 in critical condition. Hope had arrived at the hospital feeling like an imposter, but the moment she saw the first patient, everything had come back to her as if it had never left. Her hands had worked with the precision of years of experience. Her mind had processed symptoms, priorities, and procedures with the clarity that only comes from true knowledge. Her heart had beaten with the accelerated but controlled rhythm of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. She had helped save 6 lives that afternoon. As she waited for the bus that would take her back to the Davis family home, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned and found Dr. Thompson, who was looking at her with an expression of deep respect. "Hope," he said, "in my 20 years as medical director, I have rarely seen someone work with the dedication and skill you showed today." "Thank you, doctor," she replied, feeling her cheeks flush with the compliment. "It's not just a compliment," he continued. "It's a formal offer. I want you to come back, not as a night shift supervisor, but as head of nursing for the emergency department. It's a position with a lot of responsibility, with an excellent salary and full benefits." Hope felt as if the world was shaking beneath her feet for the second time in 2 days. "Doctor, I don't know if I'm ready for that much responsibility. What I saw today tells me otherwise," he replied firmly. "You led a team of 15 nurses as if you were born to lead. You made difficult decisions under extreme pressure. And most importantly, you remembered why you chose this profession." "What do you mean?" "I saw how you spoke with the relatives of the injured. I saw how you comforted the little girl who was asking for her mum. I saw how you held the older gentleman's hand while the doctors worked on his wife. You didn't just save lives today, Hope. You healed hearts." Tears began to roll down Hope's cheeks, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of recognition, of reunion with herself. "When do you need my answer?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," Dr. Thompson said, "but I hope it's not too long. We need you." As the bus took her back to Druid Hills, Hope looked out the window at the streets of Atlanta that were beginning to light up with the evening lights. She thought of Richie, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel the stabbing pain of his absence. Instead, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for having known such pure love. Gratitude for having learned from him the importance of dedicating one's life to saving other lives. She thought of her unborn baby, and instead of the heartbreaking emptiness that always accompanied that memory, she felt peace. Her baby hadn't made it into this world, but had left an important message, that true love never dies. It just transforms. And she thought of Sebastian, of his blue eyes full of faith in her, of his words of encouragement, of the way he had believed in her when she didn't even believe in herself. Upon arriving at the Davis mansion, Hope went directly to her room. She needed to shower, change her clothes, and mentally prepare herself for the conversation she knew she would have to have with Sebastian and Mrs. Evelyn. But as she passed the backyard, she saw lights on the terrace and heard voices. She crept closer and hid behind the hydrangeas to listen. Sebastian was sitting in one of the wicker chairs on the terrace, but he wasn't alone. Across from him, elegant as always, was Isabella Coleman. Even at night, even at an informal gathering, she looked as if she had stepped out of the pages of a high society magazine. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, her white designer dress fit her like a glove, and her red heels probably cost more than the monthly salary Hope earned as a domestic employee. "Sebastian, darling, I don't understand what's been going on with you lately," Isabella said in a sweet voice with a hint of impatience. "It's been weeks since you've called me, since you've reached out. My parents are starting to wonder if what we talked about last year is still on." "What we talked about?" Sebastian asked, though his voice sounded distant. "Please," Isabella laughed, but her laugh sounded forced. "You know perfectly well what I'm referring to. Our parents have been planning our union for years. You yourself said it would be the most convenient thing for both families." Hope felt as if a dagger had been plunged into her chest. Had Sebastian been planning to marry Isabella? Had everything he had said about loving her been a lie? Isabella, Sebastian began carefully, things have changed. Changed how? She asked, and for the first time her voice lost its sweetness. Because of that little employee your mother told me about? Hope held her breath. My mother shouldn't have told you anything, Sebastian said firmly. Please, Sebastian, Isabella exclaimed, standing up and starting to pace back and forth. Mrs. Evelyn is worried about you. She says that since your accident you've been acting very strange, that you've become infatuated with the help. It's not an infatuation, Sebastian said, also standing up. Then what is it? Isabella shouted, completely losing her composure. Because it can't be love. You can't love a maid. She's not a maid, Sebastian replied in a strong voice. She's a specialized nurse who saved my life. She's a woman who has suffered more than you could ever imagine, and who is still gentle and generous. She's a domestic employee who used to do your laundry and make your breakfast. Isabella interrupted him cruelly. And if she really was a nurse, why was she working as a maid? What is she hiding? That's none of your business, Sebastian said firmly. Of course it's my business, Isabella shouted. Because I'm the one who's supposed to marry you, because I'm the one who has patiently waited for you to grow up and realize that we are perfect for each other. Isabella, no, she continued, with tears of rage in her eyes. I will not let you ruin your future, our future, for a sick obsession with a woman who clearly has psychological problems. The silence that followed was so tense that Hope could feel it, even from her hiding place. Leave, Sebastian said finally, in a voice so cold that Hope had never heard before. What? Isabella asked, as if she hadn't understood. I said, leave, he repeated. Now. Sebastian, I'm only going to tell you this once, Isabella, he continued, walking toward her until he was very close. I'm not going to marry you, ever. I don't love you, I've never loved you, and I'm never going to love you. What my parents planned, what your parents expect, is not going to happen. You're making a huge mistake, Isabella yelled. That woman is not our class, she doesn't understand our world. She can't give you what I can give you. And what can you give me? Sebastian asked sarcastically. Social connections, financial benefits, a trophy wife who looks good in pictures. I can give you stability, Isabella replied. I can give you a life without complications. I can give you children who inherit the best of both families. I don't want a life without complications, Sebastian said. I want a real life. I want real love. I want a woman who loves me for who I am, not for what I have. Isabella looked at him as if he had lost his mind. You can't be so naive, Sebastian. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't keep family businesses running. Love is the only thing that makes life worth living, he interrupted her. And if you don't understand that, then we really don't know each other at all. Isabella was silent for a moment, breathing deeply to calm down. When she spoke again, her voice had regained its calculated coldness. Very well, she said. If that's your final decision, I have something to tell you. What's that? My father has already started conversations with the Japanese investors who were interested in buying part of your hotel chain, she said with a cruel smile. If you break up with me publicly, if you humiliate my family by cancelling a union that everyone expects, he's going to withdraw his financial support, and without that support, your company is going to be in serious trouble. Sebastian looked at her with a mix of disbelief and disgust. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the consequences, Isabella replied coldly. Choose a comfortable life with me or a complicated life with your little employee, but without a family business to run. Get out, Sebastian said, with a voice so full of contempt that even Hope shuddered. I'll give you a week to think about it, Isabella said, picking up her handbag. 1 week, Sebastian. After that, the consequences are going to be irreversible. Isabella headed for the exit, but stopped next to the hydrangeas where Hope was hiding. For one terrible moment, Hope thought she had been seen, but Isabella only stopped to fix her hair in the reflection of the window. And Sebastian, she added without turning, give my regards to your little employee. Tell her I hope she enjoys the time she has left in your life. After Isabella left, Sebastian sank into the chair with his hands covering his face. Hope wanted to come out of her hiding place, run to him, comfort him, tell him everything would be okay. But Isabella's words echoed in her head like alarm bells. Would Sebastian lose his company to be with her? Would he destroy his financial future for a love that might not last? Was it fair to ask him to sacrifice everything his family had built for generations? As she reflected on these painful questions, Hope didn't notice that someone else had been listening to the conversation from another angle of the garden. Mrs. Evelyn came out of the shadows and approached her son. "Did you hear everything?" Sebastian asked, without lifting his head. "Enough," his mother replied, sitting in the chair that Isabella had occupied moments before. "Sebastian, we need to talk seriously. If you've come to tell me that Isabella is right, that I should marry her to save the company—" "No," Mrs. Evelyn interrupted him softly. "I've come to tell you that I'm proud of you." Sebastian lifted his head in surprise. "What?" "I'm proud that you defended Hope," his mother continued. "I'm proud that you put love above money. And I'm proud that you realize that Isabella Coleman is exactly the kind of woman you don't need in your life." "But Mom," Sebastian said, "if Isabella's father follows through on his threat, then we'll find another way," Mrs. Evelyn replied with determination. "Your father and I didn't build this company for you to be a prisoner of it. We built it so that you would have the freedom to choose your own path." "And what if that path includes Hope?" Sebastian asked. Mrs. Evelyn smiled for the first time since this whole situation had begun. "Then that girl had better accept the job at the hospital, because she's going to need a decent salary if she's going to be part of this family." Mother and son hugged in silence, while the lights of Atlanta began to flicker in the distance like earthly stars. Hope, who had heard the entire conversation, felt as if her heart was going to explode with emotion, but she also felt the weight of responsibility. She now knew that her decision would affect not only her future, but also Sebastian's and his family's. She walked stealthily toward her room, but before she got there, she heard her name, Hope. She turned and saw Sebastian standing in the terrace doorway, illuminated by the golden light coming from inside the house. "How long have you been there?" he asked softly. "Long enough," she replied, using the same words his mother had used minutes earlier. Sebastian walked toward her until he was a few feet away. And what?" she asked, although she knew perfectly well what he wanted to know. "Are you going to run away again?" he asked. "Are you going to use this as an excuse to get away from me?" Hope looked into his blue eyes, those eyes that had really seen her from the first day, those eyes that believed in her when she didn't even believe in herself. "No," she said finally, "I'm not going to run. And the job at the hospital? I'm going to accept it," she replied with more firmness than she had felt in months. "I'm going to go back to being a nurse. I'm going to go back to being myself." Sebastian smiled with a happiness so pure it lit up his entire face. "And us?" Hope moved closer to him until there were only a few inches between their bodies. She could feel the warmth radiating from him. She could smell his cologne mixed with the natural scent of his skin. "We," she said softly, "are going to figure it out one day at a time." And for the first time since they had met, Hope stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a soft, timid kiss at first, but it gradually became deeper, more confident, more real. When they separated, both were breathing a little faster. "Do you know what this means?" Sebastian asked her, taking her face in his hands. "It means I'm going to have to learn to be brave again," she replied. "It means," he said, kissing her softly on the forehead, "that you're not alone anymore." But what neither of them knew was that Isabella Coleman was not one to give up easily, and that her threat about irreversible consequences had not just been empty words. The next day, as Hope was getting ready for her first official day as head of nursing for the emergency department, and as Sebastian was heading to the corporate offices of the family hotel chain, neither of them imagined that Isabella's father had already put a plan into motion that could separate them forever. A plan that had to do with Hope's medical past, with the accident that had killed Richie, and with a secret that had been buried for months. Could their newfound love survive the machinations of a scorned woman and a powerful family? Or would they discover that some secrets from the past are too dark to overcome? Chapter 5. 3 weeks after the kiss in the garden, Hope's life had changed in ways that just a few months ago would have been unthinkable. Every morning she got up at 5:30, not to clean the Davis house, but to head to Emory University Hospital, where she led a team of 23 specialized nurses in the most demanding area of the hospital. Her new apartment in the Highlands neighborhood was small but cozy, with windows facing east, so the morning sun would wake her up naturally. For the first time in months, she had a space that was completely her own, decorated with plants she had chosen herself and photographs that didn't hurt to look at. And there was Sebastian, handsome, persistent, in love Sebastian, who called her every night after her shift, who visited her on weekends with fresh flowers from the local farmer's market, who looked at her as if she were the 8th wonder of the world every time he saw her arrive at the hospital after a difficult day. It was a Friday night, and they were having dinner at a small Southern comfort food restaurant in downtown Atlanta. The place wasn't elegant, but the food was authentic, and the atmosphere was intimate. Hope was wearing a navy blue dress she had bought with her first paycheck as head of nursing, and Sebastian couldn't stop looking at her. "What?" she asked him, noticing his intensity. Nothing, he replied with a smile. Just, I like to see you like this. Like this how? Complete, he said, taking her hand across the table, as if all the pieces of you have returned to their place. Hope felt her cheeks warm up. 3 weeks of dates, of long conversations on the phone, of kisses that were becoming more and more natural, and she still blushed like a teenager when he complimented her. Sebastian, she began, there's something we need to talk about. What's that? He asked, although his expression became slightly worried. Isabella, Hope said. It's been 3 weeks since she threatened you. Has she kept her word? Have there been consequences for the company? Sebastian sighed and let go of her hand to run his fingers through his hair. There have been complications. What kind of complications? Isabella's father withdrew his support for the expansion into the Florida Keys, Sebastian explained, and he convinced 2 of our main investors to reconsider their contracts. Hope felt as if cold water had been thrown on her. How much money does that represent? Enough to have to postpone 3 important projects, Sebastian admitted, but it's not the end of the world. We'll find other investors, other ways to finance the expansion. And what if you don't find them? Hope asked with concern. We'll find them, he insisted, taking her hand again. Hope, I don't want you to feel guilty about this. It was my decision, and it was the right decision. But what if what? He interrupted her softly. What if Isabella was right? What if I should have married her to save the family business? Hope nodded, unable to speak. Then I would have been a cowardly man who puts money before love, Sebastian said firmly. And I would have been a miserable husband married to a woman I don't love. Is that what you want for me? No, Hope whispered. But I also don't want you to lose everything because of me. It's not because of you, he insisted. It's because of my decision. And it's a decision I would make 1,000 times over. Just then, the waiter approached their table with an uncomfortable expression. Excuse me, he said nervously, but there's a young woman at the entrance who says she needs to talk to you urgently. Hope and Sebastian looked at each other with curiosity and followed the waiter to the restaurant entrance. There was Marissa, Hope's cousin, but she looked completely different from how Hope remembered her. She was pale, nervous, and had deep circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Marissa, Hope said, surprised, what are you doing here? How did you know where to find me? "'Cause," Marissa said in a trembling voice, "we need to talk. Urgently." "What's wrong?" Sebastian asked, immediately noticing the tension in the air. Marissa looked at Sebastian with suspicion. "It's private," she said. "Marissa," Hope said firmly, "Sebastian is important to me. You can talk in front of him." Marissa took a deep breath and looked around the restaurant as if she was afraid someone might hear her. "Can we go to your apartment?" she finally asked. Half an hour later, the 3 of them were sitting in the small living room of Hope's apartment. Marissa had accepted a cup of chamomile tea, but she hadn't touched it. Her hands were visibly trembling. "'Cause," she finally began, "there's something I never told you about the night Richie died." Hope felt as if all the air had left her lungs. "What?" "I was there," Marissa whispered. "At the hospital, I mean. I had taken my little girl because she had a very high fever." "You were at the hospital when the accident happened?" Hope asked, confused. "Why did you never tell me?" Because I saw things I shouldn't have seen," Marissa continued, tears in her eyes. "Hope, the driver who crashed into Richie, he wasn't drunk." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "What?" Hope asked in a voice that was barely audible. "The paramedics who brought him in were talking to each other," Marissa explained. "They said it was very strange, that he didn't smell of alcohol, that he didn't have symptoms of intoxication, but that he had passed out at the wheel." "Passed out?" Sebastian asked, intervening for the first time. "That's what they said," Marissa continued. "And then the police arrived, and there was a detective who seemed very interested in interrogating the driver. But before they could do it, a very elegant lawyer arrived and took him away." Hope stood up abruptly and began to pace back and forth in the small room. "I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me?" "I'm telling you that the official version of what happened that night may not be true," Marissa said. "And I'm telling you that someone with a lot of money and a lot of power made sure that the uncomfortable questions were never asked." "But who?" Hope asked. "Who would do something like that? And why?" "I don't know," Marissa admitted. "But 'cause there's more." Hope sank onto the sofa next to Sebastian, who immediately put a protective arm around her shoulders. "What else?" she asked in a trembling voice. "A week ago," Marissa continued, "a very elegant, very rich woman came to my job. She knew my name. She knew where you used to work. She knew about your relationship with Richie. She asked me a lot of questions." "What kind of questions?" Sebastian asked, although he was already starting to have an idea of who that woman might be. Questions about the night of the accident, questions about whether Hope knew something she shouldn't know, questions about why she had resigned so abruptly from the hospital. What did that woman look like? Sebastian asked, even though he already knew the answer. Blonde, very put together, in expensive clothes, Marissa described. She said her name was Isabella something. Isabella Coleman. Hope felt as if the world was collapsing around her again. Isabella was investigating me. Not just investigating you, Marissa said with urgency. 'Cause she offered me money. A lot of money. She asked me to tell you that she had found evidence that Richie didn't die by accident. What? Hope yelled, standing up again. She asked me to tell you he had been murdered, Marissa continued with tears rolling down her cheeks, and that the person responsible was someone close to you. Sebastian stood up and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. That damn... Sebastian? Hope asked. Do you know something about this? I know Isabella is capable of anything to get what she wants, he replied with anger. And I know she's desperate to separate me from you. But what if she's right? Hope asked in a broken voice. What if Richie didn't die by accident? What if someone killed him? And what if it's all a lie? Sebastian replied. What if Isabella is making up this story to manipulate you, to make you feel guilty, to push you away from me? 'Cause, Marissa intervened softly, there's something else you need to know. Hope looked at her with eyes full of fear. She wasn't sure she could handle another revelation. Isabella asked me to tell you all this, Marissa continued, but she also asked me to tell you that if you stay with Sebastian, she's going to make the story public. She's going to say that you knew something about Richie's death, and that's why you resigned from the hospital. That's blackmail, Sebastian exclaimed. Yes, Marissa admitted, but it's also effective, 'cause if that story comes out, your professional reputation would be destroyed. You would lose your job at the hospital, and Sebastian, his family would also be affected. Hope fell back onto the sofa, her head in her hands. Everything she had worked for over the past few weeks, all the confidence she had regained, all the hope for a better future with Sebastian, was crumbling before her eyes. What does she want? She finally asked, without lifting her head. For you to break up with Sebastian publicly, Marissa replied. For you to say you realized you weren't compatible. For you to walk away from him and his family forever. And if I don't, she's going to ruin your life, Marissa said simply. And his too. Sebastian walked over to Hope and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Look at me, he said softly. Look at me, Hope. She slowly lifted her head, and he saw in her green eyes all the pain, confusion, and fear she was feeling. It doesn't matter what Isabella threatens to do, he told her firmly. It doesn't matter what stories she invents. I'm not going to leave you, and I'm not going to let you walk away from me out of fear. But what if she's right? Hope whispered. What if Richie really was murdered? What if I know something and I don't remember? Then we'll find out together, Sebastian replied. But we're not going to let Isabella manipulate us with half-truths and threats. Marissa looked at them from her chair with a worried expression. 'Cause that woman isn't playing around. She has money, she has power, she has connections. If she says she's going to ruin your life, she probably can. And what do you suggest? Sebastian asked, without taking his eyes off Hope. That Hope do what Isabella asks, Marissa replied. That she get away from you, that she keep a low profile, that she focus on her job. No, Hope said suddenly, surprising both of them. I'm not going to live my life in hiding because of Isabella Coleman. Hope, Sebastian asked with hope in his voice. If Richie was murdered, I need to know, she continued, standing up with determination. Not because of Isabella, but because of me. Because of Richie, because of the memory of our baby. Are you sure? Marissa asked with concern. 'Cause if you start asking questions, you might not like what you find. I've already lost too much, Hope said firmly. I'm not going to lose the truth too. And I'm not going to lose Sebastian because a scorned woman wants to manipulate us. Sebastian stood up and hugged her tightly. What do you propose we do? We're going to find out what really happened the night Richie died, Hope replied, and we're going to prove that Isabella is lying. What if she's not? Marissa asked softly. Hope was silent for a moment, thinking about all the possibilities, all the risks, everything she could lose if she decided to go ahead with the investigation. Then I'll face the truth, she said finally, whatever it may be. But what none of the three knew was that Isabella had not been the first person to ask questions about Richard Sanders's death. The detective who had arrived at the hospital that night had been investigating on his own for months, and had discovered things that would put everything in a completely different perspective. Things that had to do not only with Richie's death, but also with the Davis family business, with shady dealings, and with secrets that had been buried for years. Would Hope be prepared to discover that the truth about Richie's death was much more complicated and painful than she had imagined? And would Sebastian be prepared to discover that his own family might have connections to that truth. Chapter 6. Private Detective Anthony Moore, no relation to Sebastian's family, as he himself made sure to clarify, had his office in a 1940s building in downtown Atlanta, 3 blocks from the Fox Theater. He was a 52-year-old man, with premature gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, but who maintained the fierce determination of someone who believes in justice. When Hope and Sebastian arrived at his office that Saturday morning, they had gone 3 days without proper sleep. Since the conversation with Marissa, they had spent their nights searching online, making calls, trying to reconstruct the events of the night Richie died. Ms. Miller, Detective Moore said after hearing the whole story, "I've been waiting for 8 months for someone to ask me the right questions about Dr. Sanders's death." "You investigated his death?" Hope asked, leaning forward in her chair. "I investigated. I'm still investigating, and I have information that's going to change everything you think you know," the detective replied, opening a thick file full of photographs, documents, and reports. Sebastian took Hope's hand, feeling how it trembled slightly. "What did you discover?" Hope asked in a voice that was barely audible. Detective Moore took a photograph from the file and placed it on the desk. It was an image of the car that had hit Richie, but taken from an angle that showed details that had not appeared in the newspapers. The driver's name was Michael Coleman, the detective said, first cousin of Isabella Coleman. The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" Hope whispered. "He was epileptic," the detective continued. "He had been taking medication to control his seizures for years, but the night of the accident he had traces of another drug in his system, a drug that, combined with his regular medication, could cause severe convulsions." "Are you saying that someone gave him that medication intentionally?" Sebastian asked with disbelief. "I'm saying that Michael Coleman should not have been driving that night," the detective replied. "And I'm saying that someone made sure the right questions were never asked." Hope stood up and walked to the window. She could see the Cathedral of Christ the King in the distance, with its twin towers rising toward the clear midday sky. She thought of Richie, of all the nights she had blamed a drunk driver for his death, of all the pain she had carried believing it had just been an absurd accident. "Who?" she asked without turning around. "Who did this?" "That's the complicated question," the detective admitted, "because the answer involves more people than you can imagine." Sebastian also stood up and approached Hope, putting his hands on her shoulders from behind. "What do you mean?" he asked. The detective took more documents from the file. Dr. Richard Sanders had been investigating irregularities at Grady Memorial Hospital. Specifically, he had discovered that someone was diverting expensive medicines to private clinics. Medicines that were intended for low-income patients. "Richie was investigating medical fraud?" Hope asked, turning to face the detective. "More than that," Detective Moore replied. "He had discovered that the fraud involved not only hospital staff, but also some very prestigious private clinics in the city, clinics that had lucrative contracts with hotel chains to provide luxury medical services to foreign tourists." A horrible premonition began to form in Sebastian's stomach. "What hotel chains?" The detective looked directly at him. "The Davis chain." Hope felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. She slowly turned to look at Sebastian, who had an expression of total shock on his face. "No," Sebastian whispered. "That can't be true." "Mr. Davis," the detective said gently, "I understand it's difficult to accept, but I have documents that show your company had contracts with 3 private clinics that were receiving diverted medicines from Grady Memorial. Did my family know?" Sebastian asked in a hoarse voice. "That's the question I've been trying to answer for 8 months, the detective admitted, and it's the reason why Dr. Sanders had to be silenced." "Are you saying they killed Richie to prevent him from exposing the fraud?" Hope asked, with tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. "I'm saying that Dr. Sanders had scheduled a meeting with the state attorney for the week following his death," the detective replied. "A meeting where he was going to hand over all the evidence he had collected." Hope sank into the chair, overwhelmed by the revelations. So it wasn't an accident?" "No," the detective confirmed. "It was murder." Sebastian walked toward the window, his hands clenched into fists. His mind worked at full speed, processing the implications of what they had just heard. "Detective," he said finally, without turning around, "did my father know?" "Mr. Davis," the detective replied carefully, "I've reviewed all the corporate documents I could get my hands on. There is no evidence that your father, or any direct member of your family, was involved in the fraud. But someone in your organization was involved, someone with enough authority to sign important contracts." "Who?" Sebastian insisted. The detective took another document from the file. "Your main business partner, Mr. Frederick Coleman, Isabella's father." Hope and Sebastian looked at each other with growing horror. Frederick Coleman had access to privileged information about Dr. Sanders's movements, the detective continued, and he had the resources and connections to organize. What happened? Did Isabella know? Hope asked. That, the detective said with a bitter smile, is a very interesting question. He took out one more recent photograph. It was Isabella leaving an office building in downtown Atlanta. This photo was taken 6 months ago, the detective explained. Isabella Coleman leaving the office of the lawyer who represented Michael Coleman, the same lawyer who made sure the right questions about the accident were never asked. Then Isabella did know, Hope whispered. Isabella didn't just know, the detective said. Isabella has been orchestrating everything that has happened in recent months. Her romantic approach to Sebastian was not a coincidence. Her knowledge of your past was not a coincidence either. What do you mean? Sebastian asked, returning to his seat. It means that Isabella Coleman found out months ago that you had hired Hope as a domestic employee, the detective explained, and she realized that if Hope and you fell in love, if Hope went back to work as a nurse, if she started asking questions about her fiancé's death, the whole fraud could come to light. That's why she threatened me, Sebastian said with understanding. That's why she wanted to separate me from Hope. Exactly, the detective confirmed. And that's why she made up the story about you being in danger if you stayed together. She wanted to scare Hope into walking away voluntarily. Hope stood up slowly, feeling as if she were emerging from a very long, very dark dream. Richie died because he was trying to do the right thing, she said in a clear, firm voice. He died because he wanted to protect vulnerable patients. Yes, the detective confirmed, and for 8 months, I've carried the guilt, the pain, believing it had just been a cruel accident of fate. Yes. What can I do? Hope asked, looking directly at the detective. How can I make sure justice is done? The detective smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Ms. Miller, I've been waiting 8 months for someone to ask me that question. He took another document from the file. I have enough evidence to reopen the investigation into Dr. Sanders's death, but I need you to testify about what Richie had told you about his investigations. He had told me about the fraud, Hope asked, confused. According to my investigation, yes, the detective replied. His co-workers at the hospital remember that he had mentioned that he was sharing his concerns with his girlfriend, a nurse at the same hospital. Hope closed her eyes, trying to remember. Gradually the memories began to come back. Richie coming home later than usual, Richie asking strange questions about certain medications, Richie asking her about patients she had treated in the emergency department. He had noticed that some patients were arriving asking for specific medications, she suddenly remembered. Expensive medications that they supposedly needed for treatments at private clinics. What else? The detective encouraged her. He asked me if I had noticed any patterns, Hope continued, the memories flowing more clearly. Patients who arrived with symptoms that didn't match the medications they were asking for. And what did you tell him? I told him that I had noticed something strange, Hope remembered, and I told him that I would be willing to help him document what we had observed. The detective smiled with satisfaction. That, Ms. Miller, makes you a key witness in the investigation that Richie was conducting. What does that mean? Sebastian asked. It means that they have enough evidence to prosecute Frederick Coleman for medical fraud and conspiracy to commit murder, the detective replied. And it means that Isabella Coleman can be prosecuted as an accomplice after the fact. Hope felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because she finally knew the truth. Sadness because that truth would not bring Richie or her baby back. How long will it take? She asked. With your testimony and the evidence I've collected, the detective said, we could have arrest warrants in a week. Sebastian walked over to Hope and hugged her. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked softly. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be publicity. There are going to be questions. Hope looked into his blue eyes. Those eyes that had really seen her from the first day. Those eyes that had loved her even when she didn't love herself. I have to do it, she said firmly. For Richie, for all the patients who were stolen from, and for us. For us, Sebastian asked. Because I don't want us to have to hide, she replied. I don't want Isabella to have power over us ever again, and I don't want our love to be built on lies and half-truths. Sebastian kissed her softly, a kiss full of love, pride, and determination. Then we'll do it together, he told her. Everything, together. Epilogue. 1 year later, the trial had ended the previous week. Frederick Coleman had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for medical fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. Isabella had been sentenced to 5 years for obstruction of justice and as an accomplice after the fact. Michael Coleman, the driver who had hit Richie, had also been declared a victim, as he had been manipulated into committing a crime without his knowledge. Hope was standing on the balcony of her new apartment in Alpharetta, looking at the mountains surrounding Atlanta as the sun set, painting the sky with oranges and pinks. In her hands, she held a photograph of Richie, but for the first time in over a year, looking at it didn't cause her a stabbing pain. It caused her gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the photograph. "Thank you for teaching me to be brave. Thank you for showing me what it means to love completely. And thank you for giving me the strength to move forward." She heard footsteps behind her and smiled without turning around. She knew those footsteps. "Talking to Richie?" Sebastian asked softly, walking up and putting his arms around her waist from behind. "Saying goodbye," Hope replied, leaning back against his chest. "Not goodbye to his memories, but to the guilt, to the anger, to the pain that wouldn't let me live." "And how do you feel?" he asked, kissing her softly on the cheek. "As if I can finally breathe completely," she replied, turning in his arms. "As if I'm finally free to love again." Sebastian looked at her with those blue eyes that had saved her in so many different ways. "Hope," he said, with a seriousness she hadn't heard before, "there's something I want to ask you." "What's that?" To her surprise, Sebastian knelt in front of her, taking a small navy blue velvet box from his pocket. "Hope Miller," he began, his voice trembling with emotion, "you have been the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever met. You have taught me that true love is not just about finding the right person, but also about becoming the right person for them." Hope put her hands to her chest, feeling her heart beat so fast she was sure he could hear it. "You have taught me that broken people can be repaired," Sebastian continued, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful engagement ring with a diamond that reflected the sunset light, "and that hearts that have lost a lot can love even more deeply." Tears began to roll down Hope's cheeks, but they were tears of pure happiness. "Will you marry me?" Sebastian asked. "Will you build a life with me? Will you help me be the man I want to be for you?" Hope looked into his eyes and saw her entire future there. She saw shared mornings and nights of deep conversations. She saw children laughing in sunny yards. She saw two people who had found the healing they had both been searching for in each other. "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Sebastian put the ring on her finger with hands trembling with emotion, and then stood up to kiss her. It was a kiss that tasted of new beginnings, of fulfilled hope, of love that had survived all the storms. When they separated, Hope looked at the ring on her hand. It wasn't the biggest or the most expensive, but it was perfect because it represented something real, something conquered through pain and perseverance. "Do you know what?" she said to Sebastian, taking his face in her hands. "What?" "I think Richie would be happy for us," she said with a smile. "I think he would be happy to know that his death was not in vain, that it served to protect others, and I think he would be happy to know that I found love again." "Do you really think so?" Sebastian asked. "I really do," she confirmed, "because true love is not jealous of other loves. True love wants us to be happy, no matter who with or how." That night, as they had dinner at the same small restaurant where they had had their first official date, Hope thought about the entire journey she had taken, from being an invisible domestic employee to becoming the youngest head of nursing in the history of Emory University Hospital, from being a woman broken by loss to being a woman engaged to the man of her dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked her, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most painful endings," she replied. "That sometimes we have to lose everything to find what's truly worthwhile." "And what's worthwhile?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. "This," she said, pointing between the two of them. "Us. The truth, justice, the possibility of building something beautiful on the rubble of what we lost." Sebastian raised his glass of wine. "To new beginnings," he toasted. "To the broken hearts that learned to love again," Hope added, clinking her glass against his. And as the lights of Atlanta lit up around them like earthly stars, two people who had found love in the most unexpected place toasted to a future full of infinite possibilities. Epilogue. 1 year later. The wedding was held in the garden of the Davis family home on a perfect October afternoon, when the Atlanta weather is most beautiful. It was not an ostentatious wedding, but intimate and full of meaning. The guests included co-workers from the hospital, true friends, and family who truly mattered. Mrs. Evelyn, who had become a second mother to Hope, cried throughout the entire ceremony, not tears of sadness but of pure happiness at seeing her son marry a woman who loved him completely for who he was, not for what he had. Dr. Thompson officiated the civil ceremony, and in his speech he mentioned that he had rarely seen a love so authentic and so conquered through adversity. Hope wore a simple but elegant wedding dress, with delicate lace she had chosen herself. In her bouquet, she carried white roses and a small marigold in honor of Richie and her unborn baby, a way of including them in her new beginning. Sebastian, dressed in a dark grey suit that made his blue eyes stand out, couldn't stop smiling. During the vows they had written together, he promised Hope that he would be worthy of the love she gave him every day. "I promise to love you not only on the easy days," he told her, in a clear voice that all the guests could hear, "but especially on the difficult days. I promise that when the storms come, and they will, we will be in them together. I promise that I will never take the gift of your love for granted." Hope, with tears of happiness in her eyes, promised him in turn, "I promise not to hide anymore. I promise to use my voice to defend what is right. I promise that my past will not define our future, but that the lessons learned will. And I promise to love you with everything I am and everything I hope to become." When the judge declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was soft, tender, full of fulfilled promises and dreams, yet to be fulfilled. During the reception, as they danced their first song as husband and wife, Hope whispered to Sebastian, "Do you know what the best part of all this is?" "What?" he asked, twirling her gently. "That when I met you, I thought I had already had my chance to be happy. I thought I had missed my turn to love and be loved," she told him, her eyes shining. "But now I know that there are no limited turns for happiness, that the human heart is so generous that it can always make space for more love." "I love you, Hope Davis," Sebastian told her, using her full married name for the first time. "And I love you, Sebastian Davis," she replied, laughing at the coincidence of their surnames. "My husband, my partner, my second chance." As they danced under the lights hanging from the trees in the garden, they both knew they had found something precious and rare, a love that had survived pain, threats, secrets, and social differences. A love that had been forged in the fire of adversity and had come out stronger. And somewhere among the stars that were beginning to appear in the Atlanta sky, Richard Sanders smiled, knowing that the woman he had loved had found happiness again, and that his death, although painful, had served to protect others and to unite two souls who needed each other. Love, after all, never truly dies. It only transforms, multiplies, and finds new ways to flourish.